Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the last day of our presentation. I'm presenting from the paper Cultural Studies. My topic is Cultural Studies and its different aspects. First of all, we have look upon the definition of what is cultural studies. I had made the recent consent what we are suffering from and what the problems is we are facing from, which is over the corona pandemic time. In the elaboration of the definition, we can have the justice with cultural studies, that it is a field of theoretically, politically, and empirically engaged cultural analysis that concentrates upon the political dynamics of contemporary culture. So here, the definition of cultural studies is emerging as the concentrates over political dimensions, because cultural studies is somewhat more connected to political dynamism, as we have the cult, that is culture. In the cultural studies, culture is somehow definitely prolonging the lifestyle of the people. Culture also includes our nationalism, day to day life, religion, perspective to deal with consequences. So here the culture studies researchers generally investigates that how cultural practice relate to wider systems of power associated with or operating through the social phenomena such as ideology, class, structure, nationalism, formations, and sexual orientations. There is also to another concept, which is gender and generation. So here gender and generation plays biggest role in the cultural studies, as we talked earlier, that it is connected to political devices or political circumstances, as gender and generation both are given same perspective as of the cultural studies. The another thing is cultural studies views cultures not as fixed boundaries, but it views it as stable and discrete entities, rather than constantly interactions and changing sets of practice and processes. The another thing is globalization. As we have taken the survey yesterday, we get to know some important points which I need to consider here, and that is that globalization should serve as humanity and not as national corporates. So we can strongly agree with this thing, that globalization must serve the humanity. It should not be that much, it should not be that much of commercial, which is not profiting the people, or which is, we can say that in recent decades, as capitalism has spread throughout the world via contemporary forms of globalization, cultural studies has generated important analysis of local sites and practices of negotiation with and resistance to western hegemony. Here western hegemony is something which is capable of spreading the capitalism, which is a contemporary form of cultural studies, because it is based on the national term, which is globalization. Globalization is globally invented with liberalization also. So this concept is wide more appreciation with the end of cultural studies. The another concept which is worldwide accepted is the cultural consumptions. Now here the question arises that how cultural consumption can be globally manifested. So the cultural studies must grapple with the fact that we now live in an era where throughout the capitalist world, or the overriding aim of government and economic policy is to maintain consumer spending levels. So here the another important aspects are that people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. So these term of consumption of culturalism in humanity, on in person's individual ability, is the another aspect to see how humans are consuming the culture. It is not only developed on some senses which is incorporated by human mind, but it is also important that how people are consuming the culture over their mind, or differentiate between how they are more relevant to class, or they are more relevant to their nationality as well. The another concept of cultural studies is the concept of text. Here, if we when we hear in the first instant the word text, we will get a formation of thing that there are some books, or something which can be read by our eyes. But here the concept of text in cultural studies is somewhat different, because it designates the television program, it designates films, photographs, and fashion material styles also. So these things can also be concluded as text, not only the books but also all these visual things which we can experience in our day to day life. So cultural studies drawn upon developing the semiotics, and so far the text of cultural studies comprises all the meaningful artifacts of culture. So these are the meaningful artifacts of culture, that culture is having all these things which we are using in our routine life. The most of these things are connected to self implementation of the people who are living in the society. And another thing is that cultural studies approaches the site and spaces of everyday life, such as pubs, living rooms, gardens, beach, and etc. All these things can be considered as text. First, when we made the interpretation of text, these we cannot imagine that living rooms or beach or garden or television programs can also be a term of text. But when we get deep into the cultural studies, we will understand how these things can also be considered as text, and why we are considering it as an important aspect of cultural studies. The another concern for cultural studies is the focus and the question that what is cultural studies major. Here the major term is the opposition of minor to, but I had concluded it by major because it is a wide strata of definition which cultural study plays in the life of the people. So cultural studies is an interdisciplinary major that examines the issue of race, ethnicity, class, culture, and drawing on the social culture and literary theories. This major introduces methods of interpretation for the analysis of cultural objects in their social content. So here social content is something which is directly interpreted by interdisciplinary things. So interdisciplinary things is a wide concept which can be the basis of the issues like race, gender discriminations, class, and nationality. There must be the class conflict, there must be the cultural conflict here. So cultural studies can also be wider studies in all this sense may play the negative aspect in our lives, but as we want to make it more wider, or as we want to more get focus on it, then the cultural studies may have these type of disciplinaries which can conclude the culture by itself. Now the another thing is the focus. Here the cultural study is focusing upon what? So the cultural studies is focusing rather than concentrating exclusively on the group of elite texts that make up so called high culture. So here high culture is something which is made more and more higher by the richer classes, not by putting down their culture or their enthusiastic behavior in the corporate world. So cultural studies takes as its focus the whole complex of changing beliefs, ideas, feelings, and values which symbolizes that define a community, organization, and sense of itself. So cultural studies main focus is not on the high culture, but to signify the main things which cannot be visible by mankind, which is beliefs, which is ideas, which is values, and which is feelings, which can be just make assumption of all those things. We cannot make it fully over the distinct place of cultural studies. Another thing is the characteristics over which cultural studies is depending upon. So here are the main five characteristics over which cultural studies can make it based upon. The first must be the object of the cultural studies is to understand culture in all its complex forms. Means cultural studies is that much of diverse subject because it concludes everything. It concludes the nature's feeling, it is having the humanity, it is considering the nationality, the globalization, the focus on culture. And if we get a sense of it that culture is also different and cultural studies is also different, so the studies of the main orientation of culture, we can conclude it as the cultural studies. And analyzing the social and political content in which culture manifests itself. So cultural studies main objective is to understand the complexity of culture, that what we are experiencing in day to day life, and what the things which are getting more and more complex in our form. The another thing is that cultural study is a site of political criticism. Now, as I earlier discussed, that cultural studies is more way forward connected to politics, because it has some more complexities. We can have some example here also, that it is not only it would that cultural studies scholar studies an object, but they may also connect this study to a larger political subject. Means that cultural studies can be a larger political subject by manifesting its own complexities. So scholars does not focus on a single or particular object, but it is way much wider than what we are thinking of. The another important characteristics of cultural study is that it attempts to expose and reconcile constructed divisions of knowledge that supports to be grounded in nature. So anything which is grounded to nature means anything which is very easy, which is colloquial to understand, and which is very normalizing by the people, can be considered as an exposure of cultural studies. Another thing is that cultural studies has a commitment to an ethical evaluation of modern society. So we are living in a modern society, so it is very obvious that cultural study has its more impact on the modern society. And the last but not the least, the final characteristic of cultural study aims at cultural studies could not be examined cultural practices and their reaction to power. The following critical theory means there are many critical theories by scholars who are mainly not focusing about on the object, but focusing on the downward thing which are experiencing by normal people in the sense the people who are concluding themselves as middle class or lower middle class people, because cultural studies is a study of whole manifestation of humanity. So in humanity, rich poor, every single person can be included. So cultural studies main importance is to give the conclusion over not only a singular form of participation, but participation of every single person in every single day of their lifestyle. So here are my citations which I had took references. Thank you, hope you all like it.